Okay guys, we're gonna go on to section 510, which is grouping, and that's our third special pattern. So I wanna go through and write out the checklist that we have. Actually, I'm gonna write out the complete checklist so you can see what we have and where we still need to go. Remember, you've gotta follow this very carefully when you factor. So step one is to pull out a GCF if there is one. That might be the number one problem spot we're having right there. Number two, look for a special pattern. So if there is a GCF, pull it out, then you still have to go to step two. If there isn't a GCF, you would still go to step two. Special pattern, now we have, of the special patterns, we've got the difference of two squares. And that's the key word, two. You can recognize it because it only has two terms. It's two squares with a minus between them. So, two terms, that one stands out. Then we have a perfect square. And remember, there's a test to see if it's a perfect square. And perfect squares have three terms, so they look different than the difference of two squares. And then the one we're going to do today is called grouping. And it is distinct from the other two because it has four terms. It's our only pattern that's going to have four terms, so it's very easy to recognize. Now, beyond the special patterns, we have trial and error. That would be the next thing to look at. Trial and error. And then once you've gone through all this, you want to look at your work and see if it's completely factored. Always check that. And then if you go through all of that and you can't do anything at all, not even a GCF, so if nothing, if you can't do a thing, you would call it prime. Okay, so that's our overall process. Very important that you follow those steps. Now, grouping, there's actually three types of grouping, but I'm not going to confuse the issue. We're just going to do two types of grouping. Okay. First type is what I call just simple grouping. This is the basic kind. And we're going to do it, I think, by example. I'll just say it has a plus sign in the middle. So let's do this. Here, sorry. I'm going to say example. Okay, our example is going to be 2ab minus 6ac plus, there's the plus sign, 3b minus 9c. And I'm going to highlight this plus sign. All right, got a plus in the middle. So this is the process. Step 1. Let me find another highlighter. Hold on. Okay. Step 1. Group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Okay, so simple grouping, and I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to put a box around this so you can identify the type. So simple grouping. All right, group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So that means I'm going to rewrite my problem for a minute. Plus 3b minus 9c. I'm going to group the first 2 terms, put a parenthesis, group the last 2 terms, put a parenthesis. Now, that's easy. Step 2 is that you want to pull out the GCF from each group. All right, now here's the first group. I'm going to look for the greatest common factor. You see how important this is. You have to understand what a greatest common factor is. It's the biggest factor that is in both pieces. They each have a 2. They each have an A. And that's it. So I'm going to pull out a 2a from the first parenthesis. In other words, factor it out. Now, how do you factor it out? Well, what do I have left? 2a times what gives me 2ab? B. Minus, because that's a minus. 2a times what gives me 6ac? 3c. Plus, pulling out a 3 from the second group. Now I'm pulling out the GCF. B minus 3c. Okay, at this point, look to see what you have. These 2 parenthesis parts must match. Okay? If they don't match, chances are you didn't do something correctly or grouping didn't work. But I'm not going to give you a problem where grouping doesn't work. So that means something was incorrectly done. All right, now step 3. You want to put together. And I'll show you how to do that. So write one of the, you have 2 parentheses that are identical. Write one of these 2. B minus 3c. In the second parenthesis is going to be the outside stuff. The 2a is on the outside and the plus 3 is on the outside. So 2a plus 3. And that is your answer. All right, I'm going to turn the page here and do an example, one more example of that. So we've got here, let me put, I'm going to put example 1 right there. And then I can call this one example 2. All right, example 2. 7q minus 7qx plus 3 minus 3x. All right, step 1. You want to group the first 2 terms. Here, I'm going to rewrite it just so that the original is there. 3 minus 3x. So group. Okay. Now the next step, pull out the GCF from each group. So I have a 7q in common in the first group. 7q times 1 gives me 7q, minus 7q times what gives me 7qx? X. Plus, because it's a plus. And notice this is simple grouping here because it had a plus sign in the middle, right? Okay. Second group, I can pull out a 3. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 3 times what gives me 3x? X. Now, looking at these parentheses, notice they match. So that means grouping worked. So your answer is going to be write one of the parentheses, and then in the other parenthesis goes the outside stuff. 7q plus 3. And that is factored. All right, so we'll take a break and then go to the second type.